And at the end of the 8-minute video, I went, it's never going to happen. This dog will never like your landlord, not in a million years. And he's like, oh my God, like just rocked his world, like just ruined his day. And he's like, what, why? And I was like, because your landlord is one of the most disrespectful people I've ever seen in my life with dogs.
Oh
And
shit.
he's like, but he's so nice. He's the nicest guy. I'm like, that's the point. He's too nice. He thinks he's talking to a toddler.
Welcome to the new episode of She Gets It Done. Make sure to hit subscribe, comment or like. We hope you love this week's episode. Enjoy! You want to tell listeners a bit about yourself? Because in New Zealand, people probably are not that familiar with you. What do you do? Where are you from?
Sure. So my name's Evan Doggett. It actually is my real last name. I have to say it in every video because surely enough, someone's like, no, it can't actually be your real name. But it is. I didn't choose it. And yeah, dogs have always been a huge part of my life ever since I was that kid that was like chasing around cats, barking at them around the neighborhood. And like, like I was that kid.
Yeah.
And then my first real job after cutting people's grass was walking to Australian Shepherds. I'm not sure who thought that was a good idea to let an 11-year-old walk two Aussies, but they were actually, in hindsight, really cool, balanced dogs. And I traveled the world for a couple years after my dad was a Mountie, so the National Police. So we lived across the country. I got the travel bug, traveled the world for a couple years, lived in Europe, Africa, South America, did some teaching English, and then went to university in the home province of where I'm from in Canada, here in Nova Scotia. And in my third year, got back from an exchange in Argentina and was like, my life is a mess. I am drinking way too much and smoking way too much weed, and I got to get my life together. I know what I'll do. I'll get a dog. A dog will solve all my problems, as a lot of young people do. And I'm not going to say it didn't work, but I had to, I had to manage a lot of other things. But it really was like I got Rush, this boxer pity mix from the SPCA in Montreal. Like I didn't even live in Montreal. I literally landed there and got a dog and then had to find a way home because you couldn't fly with dogs that time of year in Canada because it was too cold. So anyway, got back, finished university with the dog, but my whole life from that moment on has been dedicated to dogs. I finished university, but it was like school and then the rest of the time was dogs. And so walking dogs, grooming dogs, working at a doggy daycare all during university. Finished school, drove across the country, trained gun dogs for almost a year, and got really exposed to the very, very old school of dog training and got really, really turned off. Yeah, basically, like abusing dogs, like that's what they were doing. And I was just like, there has to be there has to be better ways than this. And so did more grooming when I was out there, and then I eventually came home and found a mentor. I worked with Duke Ferguson for 5 years, and also with Unleash Potential, had a franchise of his, but also just kept traveling and learning from the extremely purely positive, from other balanced trainers, from people that do pack stuff. And really around 2000 and I don't know, I guess, well, really, do you know who Wendy Volhard is? I went and did Wendy Volhard's thing. She's like the godmother of raw feeding. And so it was on Brian Agnew's suggestion. There was a big gap there. In university, fourth year, I went out and did Cesar Millan's Training Caesar Way course. And then that was like, okay, I want to be a dog trainer forever. And then moved to BC and did all the other stuff and did Wendy's natural holistic feeding. So it's like homeopathy and raw feeding and natural living and chiropractic for dogs. And it was a whole week of like very intense. Oh my God, this is how other people, like, so radically different from just like put the food on the ground and feed the dog. And I wasn't doing any food stuff prior to that because it was just old school compulsion, no positive, no. And so that really opened my eyes. Did Duke's thing, did a bunch of other people's things. And then in 2020, did my own thing, Doggett style dog training. And I've just been every year I get more invested in health of dogs because it makes such a difference. Like I had, you always get asked questions when the cable guy comes or when the plumber comes. Oh, you're a dog trainer. My dog's doing this. And so often I don't need to do a lesson with them. It's like, what are they eating? Are they spay and neutered? At what age? What's their exercise like? What's your flea and tick medication like? And then like go and make some changes. Talk to your vet first because I'm not a vet, but sometimes that could backfire because they don't know the updated information.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but I have to say that stuff to cover my ass.
Yes.
And so they do it and they're like, oh my God, my dog has energy again, or my dog is not like randomly acting aggressively. And so for the past over a decade, I've been primarily working with pet parents, dog owners, however they want to identify. I always piss off somebody by not saying guardian, sanctuary provider, some sort of PC name. But anyway, people that have dogs in their home, I mostly work with them. And then most recently, the past 3 years, training trainers has been very, very fulfilling. So there's my whole story.
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. So what did you end up studying in university, and did you do anything with
it? How to drink. How to be a better drinker. I learned very well how to do that. No, I was the only one. I think I'm the only one ever in my university to do. I did a Bachelor of Arts, and so I did a major in Spanish. I think that's the only person in my university to ever do that because we're in like, the New Zealand of Canada. Like it's just like very. Anyway, so. That's what I did, and an undergrad, I did my minor in social. And so no, like yes and no, because I get to speak to Spanish speaking people. It was very helpful during the Cesar Millan thing because he's Mexican, and it was interesting to see because I only hung out with all the Latinos and Latinas, and so like he was how he is like. Cesar Millan with white people, and then Cesar Millan with
his own
people that speak Spanish, his own people. And I got to experience that side, which was way more relaxed, and you don't have to be as PC and whatever. So that was pretty cool. And then obviously now I work with people around the world online. So if someone speaks Spanish, I can help them.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I would love to talk about the Cesar Millan thing because not necessarily from a massive dog trainer perspective, because our focus is for this podcast dog owners. But how these days when people are looking for a dog trainer, they go like, oh, you need to make sure you find a positive only dog trainer, right? Like that's one of the advice that you see on Facebook. And the other one is like, oh, you should watch Cesar Millan. And Cesar Millan obviously has this really bad like atmosphere around him these days. Do you feel like that's warranted? What would you say to dog owners? Because you've actually experienced it.
Yeah, I would say it's like anything in life. You've got some people that are like, if you send your kids to public school, they will all become Satanists. And then you've got other people that are like, if you homeschool them, they will be socially inept. And so there's extremes in everything. I've got a lot of. What's interesting is when people contact me and they're like, I saw you trained with Cesar Millan. We love Cesar Millan. We want to work with you. And I'm like, I don't really do a lot of his stuff. I think all of his like pack structure stuff, a lot of it makes sense. But putting your hands on a dog, I'm not a fan of that. Like a lot of what I learned was, what you see on TV is television. It's not real life. And him, like everybody, is like his show in the early 2000s. I'm sure he's evolved massively since then. He knows a lot about dogs, but with TV, you got to make it sensational. You got to make it, especially now. Like that was all before TikTok. Like now it's got to be like cut fast. Now this that, and so I think. Purely positive training is fantastic. I think a lot of what Cesar Millan does is fantastic. I think there's a lot we can learn from every school and every approach. And some of that is what you don't want to do. Some of that is like, well, I don't want to use this tool with this dog, or I don't want to use this technique at all. Like I've really made a point of trying to study from, like I did the Kohler method course. I would not recommend coming from a purely positive background and trying to do that course. I stopped doing the course. It's not something I would recommend, but like very old school to, doing Karen Pryor's stuff. She's another Canadian purely positive trainer, very famous person. I think there's something that we can learn from everybody. And some dogs, you don't ever need to say no to. You almost never need to say no to them. Like there's almost always a way that there's almost always a workaround with purely positive trainers. And I think they're some of the best trainers because they have to be so damn creative, because you can't say no. You can't discipline the dog. You can't make the dog even remotely uncomfortable. You can't even fart in their general direction because God forbid they'd be offended. But no pun intended. But they, there's something we can learn from everybody, right? And that's what I would say is like, some people are going to camp up whether you tell them to or not,
absolutely.
But
yeah.
Because I work a lot with people that have tried positive only before, or in my online community, and there's so much guilt for going into the balanced direction. Do you notice that's I see that a lot, so it's always good. I feel like that message needs to be out there, like try everything. There's nothing wrong with trying force free. There's nothing wrong with trying balance if you do it properly, right? It's so much guilting of, oh my God, if you ever say no to your dog, you're traumatizing them and you will never love you. It's like, it's not that drastic, everyone. It's okay.
I've definitely found like taking information from different places has been really helpful. And I think it keeps you open-minded as well. Like the more you go into everyone else, you can always learn, like you said, something about someone, and you will learn something to put in your toolbox, but then you'll learn other things and you're like, actually, no, I don't want to do that. But I took this and that's at least something, and that will make me a better trainer.
Absolutely. I think it's very easy for people to say, I would never do that. And like, yeah, you might never do that with this dog. You might never do it with the next 10 dogs you see. But when it comes down to, I can either correct the dog or punish the dog, depending how you want to categorize those, for this behavior, or I can euthanize them. And some people are like, I will still never say no. Just put them down, and that's a choice. And that's that point where it all comes down to choices. And it's easy to be a keyboard warrior as well. I think a lot of the purely positives have done a great job of being very loud. It's a very, very loud and proud community, and God love them and God bless them. And I wish I could do purely positive training, but it doesn't work for a lot. I would say most dogs. It doesn't work for most dogs. And that's just my experience. It's been over a decade. Most people come to me with challenging cases, but even puppies, never saying no to a puppy, challenging.
Agreed.
So another question we wanted to ask you was, what do you think are some of the biggest communication breakdown issues that you find with owners and their dogs?
So back to the cable guy that was here yesterday, he was like, how much do you charge? Can I get you out? And typically I structure my programs as programs, not just like one-off lessons, because there's so much foundation is missing. And he was like, my dog stops playing, mid-play. I'm trying to get her to be happy, but she's like, she'll play for a little bit and then she'll stop. And I think she looks sad. I think she looks depressed. And I was like, do you think that because you're basing everything you know about bull terriers off of Instagram and TikTok? Or like, are you looking for a problem that's not actually there? And so for me as a dog trainer, it's like, you're being a detective, right? You're like, what do you eat? How do you walk? And where does your dog sleep? And are they crate trained? And have you ever said no to your dog? And what tools do you use? And you're trying to get this picture of like, what is it like? Because I believe, and the dog trainers that I coach, I say this all the time, is like, you got to remember that most times when people come to you for dog training, they're embarrassed. They don't like, they feel like they failed either because they have to talk to a balance trainer or because they think they should have been able to do it on their own. And so the communication breakdown is sometimes like, it's a complete misconception as to what life with a dog should look like or can look like, or with this dog specifically, because most people aren't showing their bull terriers shaking the shit out of the neighbor's cat, like they're not posting that on TikTok. And so they're posting like their dog in a little fluffy vest playing soccer and playing with all the kids. But so for me, I'm like, are you creating a problem? Because so much of what people think their dog should be able to do. I was coaching somebody. I had an online lesson with somebody in New York last night, and he's like, I really want my dog to like my landlord. And the landlord, so he sends me, so because we're doing online training, he sends me video footage of the dog and him, like we have to like set up the scenario with him and the landlord. And at the end of the 8-minute video, I went, it's never going to happen. This dog will never like your landlord, not in a million years. And he's like, oh my God, like just rocked his world, like just ruined his day. And he's like, what, why? And I was like, because your landlord is one of the most disrespectful people I've ever seen in my life with dogs.
Oh, shit.
And he's like, but he's so nice. He's the nicest guy. I'm like, that's the point. He's too nice. He thinks he's talking to a toddler. He thinks he's communicating with another human that wants to see him. The guy in 8 minutes never stopped making eye contact with the dog and kept like leaning in and like reaching. And when he would like go to feed him, it was like feed him. And then the hand would stay there and then get closer and then lean in. And then the dog loses his mind. It's like, I'm going to freaking kill you. And the landlord's like, oh, and he's like doing this and his eyes are big and he's like leaning towards the dog. And I was like, he doesn't get it and he probably never will get it. And he's like, oh, but he mentioned like he just can't wait for the day that he can come up to my apartment and just snuggle on the couch with Seymour. And I was like, exactly. This is why, like, this is a dog that, and I'm saying this to the guy, I'm like, this is a dog that I would guess probably doesn't like to snuggle on the couch with you, and you own him. And he's like, yeah, sometimes he'll growl at me if I go over to pet him or whatever. And I'm like, exactly. Like, this is a coon hound mix that probably has some health stuff going on. I would venture to guess, but still he's an independent dog. He's the kind of dog that's like, I don't need people. I'll just go kill 12 possums and eat those tonight. And I don't, or whatever wildlife. I don't think they have possums. Yeah. Like, and so I don't really need people, let alone someone who's desperate for affection. So to answer your question, where's the communication breakdown is like people not understanding or seeing the dog in front of them not appreciating who this individual is. And from the human perspective, like one of my kids is or has Asperger's. And so he's a very different individual than my other son. And so like one is, the Asperger's is like the most literal person in the world. It's very hard to joke around with him. He's learning how to have a sense of humor. I'm constantly taking the piss. I'm constantly
That's like, that would be hard for you, surely.
Oh my God. I've had to learn so much. But like, when the way I was raised was like, if we're like horsing around, playing around, goofing, and I say no, it's like if I just my mom and dad, most of my mom would always just like push more. Like if you're uncomfortable, I'll just make it more uncomfortable till the point where we laugh, and then I'll make everything better. And it's like I've had to learn so much. And so when I say things about like the landlord or whatever, I'm still going through that journey too. I've had dogs in my life where I'm like, let's be like this, and they're like, no, let's not. And so, yeah, I think that's the biggest communication breakdown is not appreciating dogs for who they are, or boldly accepting who they are, who they think they are, right? Because they're like, well, he's a bit of an asshole, so let's just, let him do his own thing all the time.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I feel like that comes a lot with the breed as well. Or that's what border collies do. Or, you can't train a beagle recall, like that.
Yeah. Beagles can't be off
and
leash.
That's just how they are. Yeah. And you have to live with that. Yeah. I think that even comes with like people that love like the same breed, and they get consistently the same breed after breed after breed, and they might get lucky and have like two in a row of like really like laid back Labradors, and then there's the next one that is just, you know, like
off his head,
super OTT and needs a lot of training. They're like, oh, but that just isn't like my other ones. And I'm like, they're not the same. You could literally get from the same litter and they won't be the same. They're all individuals. Just like kids, like, you know, you'll have like, you could have two kids. They're never going to be the same, completely different. They've got their own personalities and everything.
Want to hear the craziest thing? I've got a client that always gets a female black lab, and they've named all of their dogs, all 8, the same name.
It's so weird to me. I've had a client like that with
eight Maisies in a row.
But why? You know, like how do you call them? Like, oh yeah, 4 Macy's ago, that is just bizarre to me, man.
Yeah, they're crazy. They're crazy.
I do like your take on social media playing such a big part of it. Like, you know, obviously people have unrealistic expectations, but do you feel like it's gotten worse then due to social media, TikTok, all that kind of stuff?
It depends on the age of the client. So like when I'm working with trainers, we do this like client avatar, who's your ideal client. And because, you know, you can't want to work with everybody. You know, some people like to work with seniors. Some people like to work with people in their 20s. My demographic is millennials. Yeah. It's my favorite. Either like single or in a relationship, millennials, no kids. And it's because so much of their problems are social media based. And I figured that out so I can help them so much easier when they're like, my dog's being rude at the dog park. And while a lot of times, yeah, I agree. I'm like, but is the real problem because you think that it's a reflection of you as a dog parent? Right. And then like you've done a bad job because you can't communicate through your voice. Hey, that's not appropriate. And sometimes it's stuff like they're smelling the other one's bum too long. And it's like, well, like the other one doesn't have a problem with it. The other one's into it. Like, why is this a problem? Is this a problem? Sometimes it is, you know? And so a lot of the problems that they do face is like, you've been told you need to do things purely positive parenting, and you've seen these videos and you've seen these things, and like you feel like, you know, a piece of crap because you haven't curated this child that acts perfectly at the dog park. It's like, well, that's because it's a different species. And so once they get that click in order, they're challenging to work with in some ways because they're like, I don't want to make my baby uncomfortable. And I'm like, I get it, but what's the alternative? Because you can't walk down the street anymore, you know? So I like working with them because I can sympathize with that. Like, yeah, it is embarrassing. You know, like I really try to do a good job of never making my clients feel more embarrassed than they already are. I think I've been told so many horror stories of just like, mostly from purely, well, not, I guess, whatever, from other trainers that are just like make people feel like crap because of the tools they use or the tools they don't use, or, you know, their timing is off or whatever. And it's like, hey, do you want this to be your full-time job? No? Okay, great. Let's go at this in the fastest, easiest, best, most efficient way. And then obviously I'm into looking at the dog as a whole. So it makes it easier when they don't have kids, because kids take all of your money and flush it down the drain. And so they've got a little bit of extra money to put into their dog's health, and they want to, you know, they want to, versus millennial or versus like, and time, versus like boomers. They have the money, they don't want to spend it, and they're just like I've talked to so many old men that are like, I'll just get a new one. Just not worth the money. I get a new dog for that much money. You know, like, wow. Yeah, you can. How's that one going to turn out? Hopefully better. Good luck. You know, so some of them are great. Like, you know, I work with people. I don't say no to people depending on their age. It's just, that's my That's my
Yeah, you can have a
demographic.
preference. That's cool though. I like hearing that insight, and it is important. And I see that all the time with dog trainers that are fairly new and are very much like, I love dogs, but I don't like people. I'm like, well, then you're in the wrong profession because you're training people more than you are dogs. And I used to be primary school teacher for 10 years, so I feel like I have people skills. You know,
Yeah.
It's just it's that whole berating. Like, I think I saw a social media post the other day where someone posted something like, oh, if you put a halter on your dog, stop leash popping them or something. I can't remember what it was. And I commented under that, so what should they do instead? And the person was like, oh, there's enough posts on that on social media, so they need to go look for it. I'm like, well, you taught nothing and all you did was berate. And that doesn't make anyone feel good. What's the point of this? And not that that's going to change that person, but it's that whole,
maybe,
what message are you trying to put out here that is helpful? Because that wasn't it.
Yeah, if you're going to say that, you need to give an alternative of what would you do, not just say go find something else.
Yeah.
Which is funny,
There's going to be a post this week it's me out with a client. We're walking down a trail and she's got a beagle that's like, I don't know if you've ever trained a reactive beagle, but they are loud. Mm-hmm. And so we're working through it and we're like, the dog's in a very difficult situation where I've got two dogs. One of them is my intact male German Shepherd, and so he's a handful. And so he's very antagonistic. Like, he'll make those eyes like, come on, let's go. He's very playful and friendly, but he's also a bit of a dick. And so this beagle's losing his mind, and this old guy walks by, and he's like, he says something to my client, but you can see she's in the distance a little bit. And I just had this vibe that I was like, because I was walking towards the car and I turned around and I saw her and I saw him and I was like, he said something shitty, didn't he? And so he comes by and I was like, what did you say? And he goes, you're making the dog bark. You're teaching the dog to bark. And I said some stuff. And I just said, you can show us how to, you can take over. You can take over. And I said it in a pretty shitty way and whatever. And I was pissed. And I got home and I showed it to my wife and she's like, it's about exactly what you guys said. It's about, if you're going to open your mouth, teach us the better way. Right? Like, do you have something to share or are you just being a shitty human?
That's it.
So I can't.
But that's what we do with dogs, right? We say, as a balanced trainer, you say, don't do this, do that instead. So why are we not applying that to teaching people on social media? Like, if you want to grow on social media and you want to be one of those people, cool. But do it in a add value. Don't just be shitty, man. There's plenty of shitty accounts already.
Yeah. I try to keep my stuff pretty positive.
I actually saw a video of yours that made me feel a lot better. I mean, I knew it was okay, but it was quite nice. You were walking with your dog in the park and you were talking about how social media has kind of portrayed every dog to be looking right up at the owner, and if they're not looking at them the whole time, there's something wrong. And your dog is just happily going off and doing their own thing. And I was like, oh my God, I've got that exact dog. She'll never run off. She'll come when she's called, but she just wants to run around and smell and everything. And it was so nice and reassuring that I was actually, as a dog trainer, I am actually doing the right thing, just letting my dog go and do what I want to do. I asked for check-ins a couple of times just to make sure she is listening to me for safety reasons. But otherwise, that's just what she loves to do. So I think having positive stuff like that has been really, really good. And that's what I love about your platform, is that you have so much information like that if your dog's a little bit different, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. It's just trying to normalize the differences, it is the tricky part with social media is a lot of times what people see of us is just a clip, and so you might have 5 clips in a row where your dog's just doing some, flashy obedience. But as the longer I do this, the less I care about flash or precision or any of that. I'm just I just want my dogs to listen to me, the bare minimum. Don't pull me when we walk, come when I call you, get out of my face when I ask you to, sit, lay down, spit it out, pick it up, just the basics, but like not even, yeah. And I've gone through different phases, right? Like my lab is a master level hunter lab, the highest level of competition that you can have. My first dog literally knew everything from detection, agility, rally. I turned him into this pit bull mix into a gun dog, like he was doing upland and waterfowl. And so like you go through phases as a dog trainer, and none of them are better than the other. It's just a different phase of life. But I've got 2 young kids now. I'm packing up we got a hurricane coming. I surf, so I got boards in the bag in the car, and I'm, like I have different phases. I've had different phases of life, and I've learned about these different phases through the dogs that I've had, as well as like you can't expect, like that first dog. I'll never forget Teresa Richmond, a trainer in Virginia, who's always had Malinois and a few other she's had like Shelties and Dachshunds and different kinds of dogs, but mostly Mals. And she's like, when you finally, how did she put it? She said something to the effect of, when you finally let go of the idea that this dog can be perfect, you will have a lot more fun with your dog. And it took me years. I don't know that I ever really got it while he was alive. Maybe towards the end, because I was like, screw you, I can't make this dog perfect. Young and cocky and naive and whatever. And I was like, no, he had so much independence, and that was just him. That was just Rush, which made him fantastic. He was the best dog for socializing and rehabbing other dogs. He would literally, if you saw a dog was like nervous reactive, he would walk backwards, wagging his tail to the other dog. He would approach them backward. I never taught him. I don't know how to teach a dog that. And even if you I do know how to teach a dog to walk backwards, but even if you could, it wouldn't be natural. It would be very stiff and rigid, and being forced to walk backwards, And so, yeah, we learn all different things. But yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm glad that it helped normalize who your dog is for you.
Yeah, sure. I think it'll help people too, right? Because I quite like how you segued into that with the whole, these days I just want basic stuff, because I think that's what a lot of dog owners want. They just want a dog that's not a dick, right? That like,
listen to me.
I don't want to spend 30 hours a week training their dog to do a place to deal with like another behavior that's completely random. Like they just want to solve the problems that they have.
Yep.
I feel like maybe, would you say that a lot of owners fail because they go to a dog trainer that is super precise? Like I don't really care about timing when I work with an owner. Like obviously I care about timing to a point, but I'm not going to nitpick on them if they said the yes word just a little bit too slow, or they move their hand just a bit too early. Like, I don't care. Good job. Like at least you used the yes marker. So do you see clients like that coming maybe from a different one, that you're like, oh, you've been asked to do so many things that aren't actually that relevant?
Yeah, I do get that a lot. I think that's a super skill that you've learned from being an early educator teacher. An early educator is because you're like, is good enough getting the job done. They're kids, right? Like, did you color on the paper or just the desk? Hey, you got some of it on the paper, right on, like, so I think that's important. I've made those mistakes. I used to be that trainer because some of my mentors were like, it's gotta be perfect. And it was so stressful. Literally, like, I'll never forget screaming at my former mentor because like and he was super calm about it. It wasn't him. It was me putting the pressure on myself that it wasn't good enough, but I also knew he wanted to be good enough. He wasn't being a dick at all, but like, I kept putting more pressure on myself because I knew the level of precision that he was looking for, and I really didn't want to. I didn't do the work was the problem, right? Like we were in a hunting situation, and my dog couldn't do the thing that they needed to do in that situation, and it's because I didn't do the work. But that's one of those things, is like, why aren't you doing the work? It's so important. It's something that, so my wife does like performance coaching for dog trainers. So like your scheduling and achieving your goals and stuff like that. And she coaches me too. And it's one of the things that she's taught me is like, if you keep rescheduling a thing, we got to look at the deeper issue here. Right. So it's the same thing for me. Like at that point, I didn't want to put in the work to achieve the goal. So for some clients, I've got some clients that are like super A type personalities, and they are not my least favorite. I like how they push me to think about things differently, because they'll be like, but why? But why? But why? And I'm like, it doesn't fucking matter. Just like, just do it and you'll see the difference. And it's not like I'm asking them to do something dangerous for the dog or whatever, but they want to know the theory behind it. And I'm like, it's something that comes up in every consultation, is why is my dog doing this? And I go, I can take some educated guesses. I could spend the next 3 hours coming up with educated guesses as to why your dog is doing something or not doing something, and how they feel about it and what caused it and all this. Or we could just come up with a game plan of how to get from where you are to where you want to be. And so do clients come to me having worked with? Sometimes. Yep, sometimes.
Cool. I think that's another good one. The whole, oh my God, how is my dog feeling? Or why is he doing that? Like, I don't know. Can't read your dog's mind. And sometimes it doesn't matter, does it? Like, I feel, and that we go back to those expectations again that you said all the way at the beginning. The whole stop putting feelings on your dog that might not actually be true. Like, we don't know why the dog is barking. It might not be because whatever reason is in your head. Yeah, it's a good one.
I've also, on the same note, let go of being right. I think that's a very powerful thing as a dog trainer. When someone says my dog is fear aggressive, and my first instinct is to go, man, bullshit. Your dog's not fear aggressive at all. He's just aggressive. I go, yeah, maybe, because like I've been wrong, you know, and ultimately, doesn't matter if it's fear aggression or just straight up aggression. We got to deal with the problem, and the techniques are essentially the same. It might take a little bit longer, it might whatever, but like biting the neighbor's kids is not acceptable. Whether you're scared of the kids or not, when you go out of your way to try to bite the neighbor's kids, there's got to be in the way that I train, there's got to be a consequence for that. And then we'll rebuild the relationship. And so the rebuilding comes after you teach the dog to avoid the behavior. And so if the dog's just straight up aggressive and just loves to hate kids, okay, well, we can still try to do the way that we're going to build the relationship is the same way as if the dog is scared of the kids. It just, the outcome, it could be the same if the dog's or it could be different, but regardless, it's like we need to change what the dog is doing.
Yeah, does it really matter if they're going to follow what you say and they're going to do everything that you need to correct them on everything? Does it actually matter as long as you're acknowledging how they're feeling about the situation and that they know that something needs to change? I've definitely got a little bit more like that. Like, I'll have some that are like, oh, they're just protecting me. And I'm like, oh, maybe. But it's like they're like either resource guarding or they're just actually reactive. Like, I might try and explain a little bit about, like, you know, if it's like reactivity from like a fair point, like I might try and like, you know, explain it a little bit, but I'm not so worried now about going into depth about it, because that's not really the big thing. Like, I just need to teach them how to do it differently.
As a dog trainer and as the owner of the dog or whatever, that the problem with that, the only problem with that and not addressing it lies in, but are you prepared to correct it? Right? Like, even if the dog is scared of kids and is going out of their way to try to bite kids, even if they're scared, are you prepared to correct it? Because if you're not, because you think they're scared, then we just need to do a lot of avoidance stuff, and we need to do a lot of threshold stuff, and whatever. But it's not going to change them going out of their way to try to bite the kid. It's just going to be avoidance and redirection and whatever, right? For the most part. So if you're not prepared to correct it because you think they're scared, or are you prepared to teach the lesson that no means no, and there's a consequence to that? So that's the only part that I'll get. I'm like, yeah, maybe they're this way, but are you prepared to do the work that
exactly,
that I've seen make the big difference?
Yeah.
I love to segue into different topic, which will hit a bit of desexing. So at the moment, like I'm getting the notification still on my phone. I'm into a discussion on the Maltese Shih Tzu page. And the lady...
Do you have a Maltese Shih Tzu or something?
I do
Why are you
not.
on that page?
I'm just in any...
You're in all the groups.
Group. So there's this lady that has a dog that is resource guarding. Well, she isn't explaining it that way, but that's the conclusion I made, right? Like, it resource guards when she's trying to touch a dog while he's eating, and when the dog is sleeping on her lap and she moves, then he bit her the other day. And coincidentally, I also had an actual client like that last week with a Labradoodle puppy, like 6 months old, also got really aggressive trying to get them off the couch. And then both of those were recommended to desex the dog, and that'll fix the problem. Now, I told the Labradoodle owners, do not desex your dog. She's only 6 months old. It's not going to do anything to curb that problem. So we did training, put a drag line on the dog, and it was basically fixed within a week. To boundaries on the dog and just obedience. And obviously on the Facebook group, because it's Facebook, people kept being like, no, but there is scientific evidence that desexing works. It's definitely working. And I just think it's interesting to dive a little bit into, does desexing fix problems?
I think it's a complicated topic. There must be, right? Like how could it be that so many people say desexing fixes aggression if it doesn't, right? Or not that it doesn't, because that's a blanket statement, right? That means it fixes aggression for all dogs.
Yeah.
But it clearly must have fixed it for some dogs, right? It clearly must have done something along the line somewhere. And that's where I go, yeah, maybe it'll work. But guess what happens when you do that? You can't sew them back on.
That's it.
Right? Like there's no going back from that. And so it was interesting. A couple of months ago, I posted, which I never do, but I was obviously being sassy. I was in a sassy mood, obviously. And so I posted on my Facebook page, I said, what's something that you learned from a dog trainer that turned out to be very bad advice? And because I did a whole podcast on it. I think it's friggin' hilarious. Some of the amazingly horrible. One of my favorites was, just feed the dog a lot of spaghetti and it'll slow the dog down.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, I forget in relation to what problem, but yeah, just pound the spaghetti to this dog. And so but I think like in some situation, yeah. In some situations, spaghetti might work, like I don't know, but like as a blanket statement of that. So the things that I see, the problems that are created. Okay, so let's talk about the solution. Let's talk about desexing as a positive thing, right? As like this could be helpful. I asked the question, what's a piece of advice that a dog trainer has given you that was bad? And somebody wrote, to keep my male dogs intact, and the trainer was you. And so I don't know this person. I've never worked one-on-one with this person. She went on to write about how she worked with all these behaviorists and all these trainers, and she did all this work. Like, she really worked her ass off. And then one trainer finally told her to desex the dogs, and it stopped the in-home fighting. If she had been my client, it's one of the first things I would have said.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you have male dogs inside your home, multiple dogs. You can, and here's the thing is, like, again, as a blanket statement, I have friends that are breeders that have tons of intact male dogs together, and they're totally fine. I mean, probably not completely fine, but, I've got two young boys and, they punch each other in the head once in a while too. It doesn't mean that I need to snip them. And so it's something that in that particular situation, you've got these adult male dogs, You've got all this extra testosterone going around. It will calm them down, but there's a bunch of repercussions that will happen as a result of that we need to supplement. We need to give them supplements to balance their body, because their body's going to go through a radical change. And there's a bunch of medically proven, I can send you to a bunch of different medical articles, peer-reviewed, veterinarian written articles that prove that there are a lot of really horrific side effects of desexing your animals, especially the younger they are, the worse those side effects are, but the side effects are across the board. And so depending on the situation, I would say, yeah, do it. And then know all these other supplemental things that we need to give them. And so to reverse, like to kind of like turn the heater down on that question and come back to the cable guy that was here, I was like, is this a TikTok problem? Are you creating a problem where there isn't? Because he's a Gen Z and he's, they don't have kids and this is his baby and whatever. And I got to meet the dog once when I went into the shop, and she's sweet. She seemed chill. She was a very chill bull terrier, which those sentences don't normally go hand in hand. And so she was sweet. And I was like, what age is she spayed? Yes. What age? 6 months. Okay. What do you feed her? Kibble. Okay. So I was like, it sounds like she's running out of energy. It sounds like your dog is spiking and then crashing and then spiking and then crashing. And so she looks distraught, probably because she is, probably because she's physically feeling like shit. How many times has she had antibiotics? 3 times. Okay. Did you ever do anything to counter that? No. All right. Well, I've gone through weeks of antibiotics, and I slept for sometimes 16 hours a day afterwards for like weeks while I was doing probiotics and stuff. Like antibiotics can really mess up a person's, circadian rhythm and a bunch of other things. And so, is desexing, I have 3 dogs. They're all I've had like 8 dogs, 9 to 10. How many dogs have I had? I've had quite a few dogs. They've all been rescues except for my black lab. And so she's still intact. She's 10 years old. And then and every dog that's come intact, I've kept intact because I've seen the repercussions. My shepherd, this new dog, is intact. My little pitty from Costa Rica that is spayed, I only adopted her once I found out how old she was when she was spayed. I didn't want to go through a dog that was spayed at 7, 8 weeks, whatever, because they're so hard to quote unquote fix. They're so erratic. They're so sketchy. And I've got kids and I've got clients' dogs, and working with clients, I need the dog to be a business partner as well. I use them in my business day to day. And so once I found out she was spayed as an adult, I was like, okay, I'll try out the dog, and she's sweet and she's awesome and all that stuff. So spaying and neutering can help certain behavior, certain life situations. I've been contemplating neutering my shepherd because he's coming into full adulthood, and he's very intense with other intact males. He's too intense. And then so I've been asking myself, the question is like, do I need him to fulfill this role of being the social butterfly, right? Because even if I neuter him, he might never be that. So now I've got all these other things going, because he's very playful as long as they don't want to fight. And so if they want to fight, or they don't, if they're young and intact and they don't submit, he's gonna, he won't grab them and shake them, but he's a 2-3-year-old intact shepherd. He's a knucklehead. He wants to throw around his dominance a bit. And so questions to ask yourself is, what is your lifestyle, right? Do you want to be going to the dog park? Do you want to be hiking trails where there's off-leash dogs running around, whatever? Well, your intact male, even if he's super happy-go-lucky, is going to get picked on a little bit. I don't think that's a reason to neuter him, but it's a factor, right? Or, is there intact females around? Do you have, like, I have an intact female and an intact male. I always have for the past decade, and it's a pain in the ass when she goes into heat. Like, it's brutal. The boys won't eat. They're whining all night. They're howling. They're just horny teenagers forever. And it's like a month of that, And so there's a lot of factors when it comes in. I wouldn't say it's just a no, but what I would say is that if you decide to spay or neuter your dog, that you wait until they're fully grown, that they're adults. So the smaller your dog, the faster they mature, but it also depends on the dog. All of the information about, or all of the myths, basically, that like it prevents
Cancer.
It prevents cancer. It's 4 times ovarian cancer, prostate cancer. It's a 4 times increase for the dogs that have been done pre heat or post heat. It's 4x. And then if it's preheat, there's a bunch of other things that you run into. There are risks of like pyometra with females, but Vegas 10, she's still going. I think a lot of that has to do with diet and cleanliness, and there are things that you can do a bit to try to avoid that, but basically just when they're in heat. And yeah, so there are products, there are things that you want to give. And the big one, Dr. Judy Morgan and Dr. Karen Becker did a great podcast, and it gives you all the details of like the foods you can feed and the supplements you can give. And what I just found out is, because I've been preaching this Dr. Mercola, now Bark and Whiskers, glandular support for years, it took me like the 3rd time listening to that interview to realize that it's designed also for intact animals as well. It's just glandular support because it's really important for the spayed and neutered ones. It's just a powder because it has for the females, it has ovaries in it, and for the boys, it has testes in it, but it has all these other glands that are missing. It has 16 glands, 15 minus those ones. So 16 glands, organs and glands that are predominantly missing from your dog's diet. That's really important, considering if you look at them in the wild, that's what they're mostly eating. That's what they're eating first every time. All the organs, all the glands, and then a lot of times they leave, a portion of the animal protein behind. So important stuff.
Definitely. I like that you touched on because I think you and I would have answered that question quite similarly, because I said in those comments, if you were having dog-to-dog aggression, I would have suggested desex your dog. But this resource guarding is not a desexing problem. That's a behavioral problem. Like, I mean, go ahead and desex your dog and then go to a trainer. You still have the problem. So I think, and it's sad that there's still vets recommending it, I think. Like, the poor Labradoodle is 6 months.
I would say the majority.
And they're like, yeah, let's just come and desex the dog. I'm like, no, why would you do that? It's not going to fix it. In that particular case.
And I was going to ask you what you thought about the one of my friend's dogs. So she's got a GSP, and he was pretty good. Like, he's pretty easygoing till he was about 5-6 months, and then his testicles took a long time to drop, and then his testicles all of a sudden dropped, and then after that he got very hormonal and got quite kind of quite fearful of like people and everything, quite growly and everything. And like, she did heaps of training, and then it got to the point like he just wasn't really calming down. And she actually got the I don't know what it's called, but it suppresses the hormones without desexing them.
Oh yeah. I've heard of that.
Yeah, and it's worked wonders. Like, his hormones like kind of reset. I didn't know what you thought of that compared to like if you've like got a dog that is very hormonal, like say for an owner, but they don't want to desex their dog. Like, what do you think about those kinds of options for people?
I've only ever had one client. She was in England with a standard poodle, super reactive, that was on it, and I don't know enough about it, but I know it's not natural.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hey, since you're doing this training now, what do you think about weaning him off of it? Somebody told me one time when Rush had cancer and I was working with like, you know, I've got all these great people on speed dial that most people can't talk to. And so I spoke to somebody who owned, you know, one of the biggest holistic vet clinics in North America. And we were talking about marijuana for dogs. And I don't smoke pot anymore. I know I still look like a huge pothead and whatever, but it doesn't work. It never did. And it doesn't work for me. And it never did work for me. And so it was just, you know, kids doing kids things and ADHD people looking for dopamine. And so I was talking to her about using CBD and THC and all of this for cancer treatment. And she said the problem that she has with it, and it's a blanket statement for all drugs, is, okay, that's fine. You can use drugs to serve a purpose, but the dog isn't aware, you know, like all of a sudden the dog's high, you know, it'd be like if someone put magic mushrooms in a brownie and you're just like, hey, have a brownie. And then, you know, 2 hours later, you're in outer space and you don't know why. And I've heard many stories of that with people with like, I've been to Costa Rica a bunch of times and people getting being given ayahuasca with no notion, with no conception that they're on like DMT, like a very a very intense drug allegedly. And so it, you know, it's it can be that way for the dog. So I go, how's the dog feeling about these things? It's the same with all these anti-anxiety medications and whatever. It's like, I'm not a huge fan of, you know, there's a lot of information about SSRIs having no positive effect, like having no actual, they numb, you know, they control your serotonin intake output rather, but they numb you, right? But they don't actually have positive outcome from SSRIs allegedly. And so I'm saying allegedly a lot because I'm not a doctor. And so it's important that people understand that. But every dog that I've ever worked with, we've taken off anxiety medication. Every dog that I've worked with, we've been able to make massive reductions in things like epilepsy, in taking them off pain medications, taking them off of, you know, certain things, doing it through diet and exercise. You know, the body is a pharmacy. But are we providing the grounds for the body to be able to function? So I'm also not against drugs and pharmaceuticals and things like that too. Like do what works for you, but what do we actually know what the repercussions are? How did it go for your friend? Did she do that and the dog was great?
Yeah, well, he's kind of weaned off it now, and he's been fine again. So she just did one. She just wanted to do one dose because she didn't want to desex him, and he like went through a spike where he got worse, and she was really worried about it. And she was like reading. She does like a lot of supplements and everything. Like she's a massive supplement person. And so she does a lot of research, and then they said, oh, it can spike. And then he kind of chilled out, and then he was happy-go-lucky, totally relaxed. If anything, he kind of turned a bit more annoying because he's a bit more of a puppy again, because, again, like his hormones were a bit more. And I think it's been ages, and he's kind of just stayed that way, and I'm sure it's already weaned off by now. And
he's off of it.
He's off of it, yeah. She wasn't going to really put him on it again. She just wanted to see, like, kind of if it would, like, just help push him past so she could work through it, and it did. Yeah,
I would have told her that that's just a GSP being a GSP. They are weird dogs. They are sketch balls. And I've owned one. Like I said, I was in the hunting world for a long time, and they are weird dogs. And breeders are the worst person to ask, because especially like your own breeder oftentimes is because they're like, no fault on me. Like, my dogs are perfect. Everything I've ever produced is perfect. And it's like you're playing God. It's not like you built this canoe and it's got a hole in it. Like it's in part genetics. You're not, but sometimes you got two good dogs and they make a weird batch, you know?
Yeah.
It's, people probably say that to my parents all the time.
Yeah, and I think because she knew like what she was getting into with GSPs, like she'd met quite a few, and I think she was just struggling with that because she does like hunting and everything with him.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, he's happy-go-lucky now. So he's pretty good GSP. So yeah.
Cool.
Is there anything that you want to direct dog owners to? Any courses, any online resources that you do?
Sure. So you can follow me anywhere at Doggett Style, DOGGETT STYLE, doggettstyle.com. I've got online courses for e-collar training, but equally I've got a 7 elements course that I think is extremely beneficial for any dog owner, any dog trainer at any level, because it's 7 different areas of the dog's life, from raising a puppy or rescue dog, health, wellness, which includes like grooming and fitness and nutrition, unwanted behaviors, positive obedience, and a bunch of other stuff. And also a section on training you as a pet parent. So yeah, you can go to dogstyle.com to learn more if you want to learn anything.
Cool. And I would love to add to that, I love your reactive to romance course on Consider the Dog. I thought that was brilliant.
Cool.
So
good.
Consider the Dog. That's where I discovered you.
I'm there as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.